in Australia, with our coasts and our beautiful oceans, the beach occupies a very important place in the Australian psyche. Not just physically, but also symbolically. People speak of a beach culture in Australia. But the beach is a two-edged sword. It is, yes, a place of delight and fun, but it can also be a place of danger. It's a place of relaxation, freedom and play, but the beach is also a place where you have to swim between the flags and watch out for skin cancers, to say nothing of the possibility of sharks. Beach culture in Australia is not just about surfing and getting a good tan. The beach culture of Australia should include remembrance, and it should include commemorating what occurred at the beaches of Gallipoli just over 100 years ago. The beach is a place of freedom, but the beach is also a place of death, a place of remembrance. On the 25th of April, 1915, 754 Australians and 147 New Zealand soldiers laid down their lives on the beaches of Gallipoli to look after the sheep, as Jesus may have described the situation. They were willing to serve, to stretch out their hands and go where they would rather not go in order to protect the sheep. By the end of World War I in 1918, more than 60,000 Australians gave the ultimate sacrifice, with another 156,000 being wounded and a total of 420,000 Australians serving during the Great War. Those are huge numbers. Today, our Defence Force consists of less than one Australian in every 312 people. But during the Great War, 1 in 10 Australians served overseas. 1 in 10. And 1 in 23 Australians died or was wounded. Unlike the war on coronavirus, everyone in Australia knew someone who died, knew someone who was seriously wounded, knew a family that had lost one or many loved ones during the Great War. It affected everyone. War is never a good thing, and Anzac Day is not a glorification of war. I'd love more than anything to see a world where there are no wars, and we should work towards this. But if the world did not stand up to say no to evil, then our world would not be a place of freedom and a place of peace. By 1915, the aggressive Turkish Empire had taken control of countries from most of northern Africa to the Middle East, even as far to the borders of Russia, and all the way to Austria in northern Europe. They had exterminated 95% of the Armenian people, and this says nothing of the expansionist ideas of the Germans during World War I, who then became the main focus of the Great War with their desire for world domination. The sacrifice and the courage shown by the Anzacs helped form our national identity as a nation that helps when others are in difficulty. Christians help others who are persecuted. Christians help others when they are being terrorised. Christians help others when they are traumatised and when others are not able to live life to the full. Many people don't realise, but faith was an exceptionally important part of the journey of the Anzacs, the psyche of the Anzacs. Faith in God and a hope in eternal life is a part of who we are as Christians. And as a priest who has served with the Australian Army as a chaplain, I know firsthand that faith and a hope in eternal life are important even today to those who serve within the Australian Defence Force. Today's readings give us some reflection These are the readings for Saturday in the second week of Easter. But I think our readings are also, if you read them through the mindset perhaps of the ANZACs, it brings a different perspective. The gospel today, Jesus has sort of disappeared. The apostles have got into a boat. They're going from one side of Galilee to the other. They're finding it very difficult with a headwind, and they start to row and row and row during the night. 3 or 4 miles is what we're told in the gospel. And then they see Jesus coming towards them. And they think things will be perhaps okay. And before you know it, they're at the beaches. They're on the shore. We know during the middle of the night, the ANZACs got up. They were in boats. They started to row towards the beaches of Gallipoli. Almost exactly what we hear in this gospel passage today. Jesus sees them here in this gospel. And Jesus says, "It is I, do not be afraid." I'm sure some of the ANZACs who were in those boats, they were afraid. They were petrified. But I'm sure some of them who knew their scriptures well, or those afterwards who read the scriptures after experiencing this, were able to sense the presence of God with them. That courage to help them when they are afraid. The first reading, the Acts of the Apostles, talks about a time which I'm sure many people talked about shortly after the war and after every war. The early church community was ripped apart through persecution. Many of the men in the community were killed for their faith. Some of the females as well. And the community gets together in the early Christian community and realizes that there are very many widows who've lost their husbands. They've lost the ones who were there to help protect them and to look after them. And so the Christian community decide to get together and create a process to assist those who've lost family members. And this is what communities have done ever since there have been wars. And we've done this in our own country with Legacy. We get together and we support those who've lost loved ones. Legacy, a great charity, a great movement to build community around those who've been impacted, those who've died, those who've lost loved ones. We also know that in recent times, many have been impacted through PTSD, post-traumatic stress, and there are so many different paths to assist. The Acts of the Apostles, they realised, the early church, the communities and that families are affected, and that as a church we come together to help and support. This we commit and recommit to as a Christian community, but also as a nation today, to do what we can to help those who've been impacted by their service, to help those families who've been impacted by their service. For many young people, and I guess most of you might even think this way, we often expect that we will live until we are 80 or 90 years of age. Young men and women who put themselves in harm's way in the Defence Force do this not because they want a thrill. They do this because they want to serve. They want to protect life. They do this from a good place, not from a desire to be bloodthirsty, but they do this because they love freedom and they want to share that and offer that to every human being. The ode, the famous prayer said on Anzac Day, is a belief in eternal life. It is a belief in the resurrection. It is a Christian prayer. At the going down of the sun, darkness covering the world, this is a symbolic representation of death. As Christians, we remember when the world was dark. We remember that especially on Good Friday, when darkness came over Jerusalem and over the whole world as Jesus Christ died. At the going down of the sun and in the morning is the resurrection. It is the new day. It is eternal life. The last post is similar to the ode, and we'll have these at the conclusion of our Mass today. The last post was the last sound at the end of the day, and then there is silence. And we will have this today as well. Then we hear the trumpet sound the music for the beginning of a new day, the eternal day, a belief in life after death, a belief in the resurrection. Today we commemorate ANZAC Day, and there is a temptation at times in Australia to impose a secular, non-religious concept of the world upon the Anzacs. Often there is no mention of the faith and the belief of the Anzacs. Perhaps our world today doesn't have faith, but we know you can read the writings, the journals of the Anzacs. They were people of faith. Many of the Anzacs were Christians. Actually, most of them were Christians. Many of them were even Catholics, and some of them even came from our own area here in Cronulla. The Anzacs, they all believed in the value of sacrifice. They believed that defending freedom, goodness, and peace was part of their mission as people of faith, their mission as Christians. And their sacrifice would not be forgotten in eternal life. It will not be forgotten by God. My friends, next time you go to a beach, perhaps you might go to the beach later today, one of the beautiful beaches we have here in Cronulla. Remember also the beaches of Gallipoli. Remember the service and the sacrifice offered 105 years ago today. Remember that our beaches today are places of life only because the beaches in many parts of our world were once places of death, and they were places of sacrifice. When you go to the beach, remember, and maybe even say a prayer of thanks for all those who've experienced the beaches and the theatres of war over the last 106 years. Say a prayer and remember those who are serving today, those we can't see, those who are still overseas. Let us hope and pray that those who served and those who are continuing to serve will be remembered and will be brought from the beaches of death at the going down of the sun to the beaches of eternal life at the rising of the sun in the morning.